Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our meditation for attracting money, attracting financial resources for the reappearance of the Christ, for the preparation process for the reappearance of the Christ. I just want to say that we have a different kind of week coming up, and programs that are usually sent via broadcast, such as this one, will probably be sent as Zoom, and they'll be done by Tuya, who is in the north. I will try to honor my commitment to do the pre-full moon at the time that is coming up to do. But there will be sacred pentagram offerings from Tuya on Zoom instead of broadcasted via our YouTube channel. I just want to say, part of this is the difficulty that I'm having with a computer which is giving up the ghost, so to speak, and it's a kind of a race against time to try to make sure that I can transfer everything that must be transferred into a safe location. So I do have to attend to that, and it will affect my own broadcasting schedule. Well, I'd like to do a little review here of Master DK's words. Now, we know that the seed groups were a great project, a 275-year project, really, that had to be discontinued because of World War II. But I have the quite strong conviction that when the Master begins to teach again with his third installment of bridging treatises, he will be working within the context again of seed group activation. It's very necessary. These seed groups attract so much attention. They attract so much interest because people who are thoughtful realize that humanity can be served through them, and that is of utmost importance. Let's see, I think this will be good enough. So I'd like to read a little bit then about the 9th seed group, which is the financial seed group. And it's very interesting what the master says about it, he really didn't get to the point where he could organize it. We may be familiar with the idea that he organized in full form 4 of the seed groups. The telepathy seed group, the trained observers seed group, we call it sometimes the glamour group or the glamour busting group, the esoteric healing group, magnetic healers, and the education group. They had their full personnel, 9 in each, and he began to organize the political group, number 5, but found himself interrupted by something of greater importance, namely attentiveness to the developments in the war, so that humanity would not go down to defeat, which it almost did. People like ourselves who came later, we don't realize how close that was. Just the way I think we don't realize how close we came to losing our democracy through the Trump-inspired insurrection. I almost said resurrection. It was far from that. The former president inspired an anti-democratic movement, which people are backing away from, of course. But sometimes we come very close to a disastrous situation. And at that time, humanity did come very close. The time of especially the transfer from the end of 1942 to 43. It seems like a long time ago, maybe almost 70, is it 70 years? Something like that. Or maybe it's 80 years. Yeah. And you wonder why we're studying that. Well, that was almost the end of humanity as we now know it. And without the intervention of the Lords of Liberation from their points of focus in Shambhala, it would have been the end. And we are told that we would have had to start all over again to see whether a humanity could be raised up that really was working in line with the divine plan. We face today, I don't know if the situation is as dire, but money is involved, and the capitalistic motive is involved, and DK doesn't have too much good to say about at least raw capitalism. He says that capitalism has emerged and wrecked the world. Well, maybe you are familiar with that statement. It's a very bold and uncompromising statement. So anyway, we can read, I would say, a little bit here about this 9th financial group, 9th group of financiers that I think will be organized and very much finally under the control of a group of seventh ray, first degree initiates. And maybe already signs can be seen, but the seed group itself, although arousing great interest, has not yet been reorganized. We have to wait for the master to begin teaching again. So it says to us here, the ninth group, whose project is financial service. Okay, let's note that. DK further says, will be one of the most practical and interesting from the standpoint of the present world situation and modern conditions. Now here is his projection. This is in the book, The Externalization of the Hierarchy. Here's his projection of what he would have liked to have done, but could not do because of the onslaught of the forces of evil. He says, I may begin to organize this group before long, provided some of my disciples show me the subjective signs for which I look. Please note the word subjective. It's not just subtle. It has to do with soul impression. Subjectivity really begins with the soul and not with the subtle mind or subtle astral body. So he's telling us, yes, he would like to organize it, provided that some of my disciples show me the subjective signs for which I look, which involves a right understanding and a spiritual appreciation of money. And of course we can pause and ask ourselves whether even now, 80 years later, whether we possess this right understanding and spiritual appreciation of money. Because indeed, you know, we all handle money. And how do we do so? Well, he gives strong statements about how it is to be done. He goes on, by this I do not mean that any of you who do show such signs will be in this group. But, he continues, you will provide the right conditions which will make its inception possible. Now think of that. Our group or groups with which we are most affiliated maybe is something different. But by our attitude, we will set up the right conditions whereby this group could be organized. I think he was working largely in order, at least in the beginning, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 beginning. Now, he'd have to get to 9 to organize this 9th group. And the chakras involved in that group are found, I think, detailed in Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 1, around page 40, 41, 39, 40, 41, right in there. and the head center is involved, and I think the sacral center is involved, and the base of the spine is involved, and maybe the throat center. I guess if I were to quickly go over here to Dyna 1 and go to page 40. Somewhere right here. Yeah. The ninth group: head, heart, throat, and sacral centers. Therefore, head, heart, and throat are the same as the group number 1 of telepathic communicators, but he adds that materializing center, the sacral center. So I think it's very interesting to look on page 41 and 42 to find which chakras are manifesting in each one of these groups. Now, obviously, every one of us will have some kind of special affiliation with one or more of these groups. Okay. So he goes on to say, one or two of the key people, however, may form part of the financial service group if the plan works out as hoped and intended. With a hierarchy, may I add, it's always an experiment. They are too wise to consider their efforts anything but experiments. Much will depend on how the disciples and even the aspirants respond. When it comes to the initiates, the masters, the Shohans, they can be counted on to respond in the right way to the plan of Sanat Kumara. So, going on a little bit here, the Tibetan says, the task to be undertaken by this group, now note the word study, is to study, at first I guess, study the significance of money as directed and appropriated energy. And those words you see are put in italics. I believe we see that. Yeah, we do. As directed and appropriated energy. You can direct money, or you can draw it to yourself for purposes which are valid in terms of the plan, or which are purely selfish. And we have a rash now of this selfish appropriation, and it's been going on for a long time. This, he goes on to say, this direction of force produces concretization. Now, may I add, that's where the sacral center comes in. It is a concretizing center associated with Mars, associated with the moon, associated with Uranus. It is a concretizing center, so it produces concretization, and the work, he says, is then in the field of magical endeavor. which has to do with concretizing the subtle thought forms or subjective thought forms of the soul, at least in the white magical process. And additionally, this kind of effort is found for that rather synthetic seed group of 27, seed group number 10. As with the work of the other groups, says the Tibetan, the task to be carried out falls into three categories of endeavor. So the effort to, he goes on, the effort to understand the nature of prana, or of vital etheric energy, which, may I add, is involved in affecting the outer plane toward concretion, and then further, the three qualities which distinguish it. And these are, as you know, inertia, activity, and rhythm, or given their Hindu names, tamas, inertia, rajas, activity, and sattva, rhythm. In a way, sattva is the highest of the three, has a lot to do with the sign Libra as well, and Libra, ruled by the third ray, is much involved in the financial enterprises. DK goes on, when the mineral wealth of the world was undiscovered and unused, we had the stage of tamas at its deepest and most inert point. Much concerning money today is related to the karma and destiny of the mineral kingdom. Well, this was, as I say, 80 years ago. Other kingdoms have become involved in symbolizing the factor of money. So going on with DK, with this, however, we need not here concern ourselves, i.e., we don't have to right now make a study of the karma and destiny of the mineral kingdom, but, you know, mind as it is, for those, for many purposes, including financial purposes, that's all part of its karma and destiny. DK goes on. The processes of the pranic life were originally carried out in the realm of barter and the exchange of that which is found upon the surface of the earth, and later went down into the depths. So the beginning, you know, was trading, basically, and some form of more enlightened barter and exchange may be suggested and necessitated if money were to disappear, as DK tells us it might, if we don't handle it properly. Okay, so this, the processes of pranic life changed from barter and exchange and went down into the depths, thus bringing into fluidity, and may I add that would mean the flow, the movement of mineral wealth, bringing into fluidity, he says, the deepest and densest expression from the human standpoint. Maybe there are denser expressions. densest expression of divinity. And this is a point to be remembered. Okay. Now, I'm just going to try to... Okay, I hope I'm doing this in the right way so you can see. Okay. Now, just a little more here. If I can, for some reason, I'm not able to move this the way I would like to, but I will attempt at least. There's something going on here that is making it difficult. Let's see if I can... I'm sorry for this delay. Today, the process is being reversed, and money is connected with the produce of the vegetable kingdom in the form of paper money, founded upon the mineral wealth of the world. Well, even that is being transcended, and the idea of whether paper money is really tied to the mineral kingdom has been an interesting form of debate. And again, DK says, this is an interesting subjective reality to have in mind. So, going on a bit, I'm going to, it was a long time ago that we kind of reviewed this, and this would be today the 17th of October 21. Okay, a study of the processes whereby money has been deflected from personal uses, both in the good and evil sense. He says, I do not, however, intend to write a treatise upon finance. I mean, really, that was never done. You have to search through the books for what he says about money, and it is ample. Maybe a treatise was not written, but there's plenty said. And note this: if he were to write a treatise upon finance, it would be a record of man's dire selfishness. Well, 80 years have passed since this was written. The dire selfishness has extended itself into direly selfish groups and not just individuals. As he warned that it might, it would largely be a record of man's dire selfishness. But I seek to deal with money as the hierarchy sees the problem, and to consider it as a form of energy, note again, prostituted at this time to material ends or to the selfish aspirations and ambitions of well-meaning servers. Your intentions might be good, but your skill in action might be missing, and money still would be short-circuited in its proper flow. These, let's hope we don't number ourselves among them, these well-meaning servers, says the Tibetan, of them, he says, they are limited in their view and need to get a picture of possibilities inherent in the present situation, which could deflect much of this form of concretized energy into constructive channels and ways of light, deflecting money into ways of light. That's something I think to have in mind. Now, just, while we're at it here, yeah, well, there's just a little more, and I know I'm going on a bit more than I usually do in the introduction, but it's a very important section. Now, further, this group number 9, would be given to the study, says the Tibetan, the study of the law of supply and demand. I think it's the planet Jupiter particularly which controls supply, and I think Saturn would enter into that as well. So a study of the law of supply and demand so that there can be made, so that there can be made available for the Master's work through the medium of the world disciples, rather high disciples. He puts in parentheses, world disciples of pure motive and skill in action and tried responsibility. So again, ask yourselves, do I fit into this category of those who work with pure motive, skill in action, and who are or have demonstrated let's see, I hope you can see this. It looks like I'm going on a little beyond what you can see. I'm sorry for that. It just doesn't go, so just listen to my words, even if they are not showing up the way I would like them to on the screen. But, well, they seem to be, actually, showing up on the screen. So anyway, are we those? Have we so trained ourselves that we work with money in such a way that we demonstrate pure motive, fiery motive, motive aligned with the plan, skill in action, of which so much is required when we deal with that often fear-arousing subject, the use and direction and appropriation of money. So skill in action is required, and we've proven ourselves. We've taken the responsibility, and we've shown over and over again that we have been tried in our exercise of that responsibility. It has to grow, these qualities, because one of the first things the masters do when they assess the usefulness of an individual is look at how he or she handles money, that which all people, or the great majority, crave. Uh, that reminds us of the Buddha telling us, avoid the cravings, but crave in order to fulfill their desires. So, a study of the law of supply and demand so that the masters can work through the medium of world disciples, and there can be available for the master's work that which is needed, and my brothers, sorely needed by them. Well, people right away dismiss that because, they have a conception of masters and the Christ as if they need nothing, but the law is, it has to work through disciples. So I'll just finish this, and money has been deflected into entirely material ends, even in its philanthropic objectives. Well, we might say that in those philanthropic organizations, it is often used just to keep up the physical plant, so to speak, and it doesn't reach those who have the great need. DK goes on, the most spiritual use, this is important, now to be found in the world is the application of money to the purposes of education. Well, that certainly involves us because we are an esoteric educational group. And he's not just talking about that, though. He's talking about, in general, the education of humanity. When it is turned away from the construction of the form side, DK says, and the bringing about of solely of material well-being of humanity, and deflected from its present channels into truly spiritual foundations, if we knew what spirituality was, right? Much good will be done. DK goes on. The philanthropic ends and educational objectives will not suffer, may I add, because the money is pouring into the upkeep of the physical plant and not to the real need, and a step forwards, says DK, will be made. This time is not yet, but the spiritualizing of money and its massing in quantities for the work of the great ones, the disciples of the Christ, is part of a much needed world service and can now make, and that was then, okay, and can now, early 30s, make a satisfactory beginning. But it must be carried forward with spiritual insight, right technique, and true understanding. Spiritual purity of motive and selflessness are taken for granted. Now, I guess we can see the objectives are high. And so we'll go on here. This is the end of ending on 17th of October 21. I think these are very interesting and important ideas. And we have to have them in our consciousness if we're really going to be able to help financially. Not even that we have to be a member of that seed group, which he, I think, will one day organize, but even that we can really help financially. Okay, friends, I hope I was able to get some of that across. DK's words and a few ideas of my own. Whoopsie. All right, well, I've got Master DK here, and now we'll get into the meditation. And there's a principle that we have to have firmly in mind, and it's oftentimes neglected. We don't understand it, and we don't have the courage to act on the basis of this principle. To those who give shall be given, so that they can give again. And if we're going to take this as far as it goes, it will pertain to great souls like the Buddha and the Christ, to those who give all is given. Now there is a real example of the law of supply and demand, spiritually considered. So we begin by simply asking ourselves a few questions and answering these questions internally. We often, every Sunday or in the group form every other Sunday, we repeat these questions. Insight will come. Notice in this picture the money is symbolized in its mineral nature, but that is a way of regarding it that is easily recognized. It's become something else. It's become a series of numbers found on the computer and in different organizations. It's quite different now, but still this symbol holds. So we ask ourselves, if money is one of the most important things needed today for spiritual work, what is the factor which is at present deflecting it away from the work of the hierarchy? Now we can answer that personally, or we can answer that in terms of humanity as a group. What we're really trying to do is get to the roots of materialism. Another question: what is my personal attitude towards money? Do I regard it as a great and possible spiritual asset, or do I think of it in material terms? These are very, very practical questions. We're all of us faced with our use of money and how we think of it, what money can buy, or what it cannot. Another question. What is my personal responsibility in regard to money which passes through my hands? We're not just talking about cash here, we're talking about that which we are credited as having. There are different ways now that money passes through our hands symbolically. It's a question of use, and all of us are accountable, especially if we are attempting to be disciples of the great ones. So the question arises, am I handling it, money, as a disciple of the Masters should handle it? Examine yourself closely. And may I add something of which I'm sure there is always room for improvement. Regarding this great symbolic beast, the nine-headed Hydra, the money is considered, or the misuse of it, the second head of the Hydra in the triple material expression of sex, money, and comfort. Of course, money can influence the other two. We can question whether Hercules will really defeat this head in a warlike manner, or whether there is another method found in both Scorpio and Capricorn. The method of kneeling and lifting. But money can be gathered for good purposes. And it's taken humanity a long time to begin learning this. It seems that people who are abundantly endowed with it for whatever reason just want to hang on to it. So many of them. And use it for their own fulfillment of their often selfish desires. But we have to be convinced that it can be otherwise. It can serve the Christ and his masters, his Chohans, his masters, his initiates, the disciples he can influence, and finally, through all of that chain, externalizing itself, a very needy humanity, if the heart is involved, and the skill in action, the wisdom is involved. We've been told that the lack of money for the ashramic projects of the great ones is a great crux of a great problem. How shall it be overcome? How shall humanity's fearful selfishness be broken? It will be broken. But what is the process? Whereby the money in the world is rendered subsidiary to the great second aspect of love wisdom, which truly makes things better for so many, and will not stop until the suffering people of the world, and the kingdoms too, who suffer because of misuse, and until the right attitude has been developed, it will not stop. He for whom the whole world waits has said that whatsoever shall be asked in his name, and with faith in the response, shall see it accomplished. But what are we asking for in the name of Christ? It can't be our usual selfish fulfillment of non-spiritual desires. You cannot ask that in Christ's name. one great process covering millions of years has been the defeat of the rampant Martian process of selfishness. It's not yet defeated after all these years. But a defeat is on its way. And if we understand this prayer, we will understand how the defeat can occur. The image there is amazing. I guess it's the great statue over Rio, very high, and as if protecting not only the city but humanity as a whole. So can we say this prayer and mean it? O Thou, in whom we live and move and have our being, the power that can make all things new. Turn to spiritual purposes the money in the world. Touch the hearts of men everywhere so that they may give to the work of the hierarchy that which has hitherto been given to material satisfaction. The new group of world servers needs money in large quantities. I ask that the needed sums may be made available. May this potent energy of thine be in the hands of the forces of light. Well, in a way, we're praying to Sanat Kumara and to the planetary logos in whom we live and move and have our being. And this great energy of materialization, concretization, materialization has to be turned to the concretizing of those correct conditions, the materializing of those correct conditions which will uplift humanity and render its fate far more beautiful, tolerable than presently it is, with so many millions, billions suffering because those who control the flow of the concretizing power care only about themselves and not about those who are suffering. So we want to have this power There's, of course, the vegetable representation of money, paper money, with a great initiate, by the way, on the bill. Um, However, yeah, and a very honest initiate who, when sort of ran the finances of the Revolutionary War through his own account and paid back every farthing that was due. So a strict accounting was made. But now, as I say, we have other methods, and our banks and other institutions store the money that pertains to us, but it still symbolically is passing through our hands. So this is the great understanding to have. If we understand what we're asking for, we cannot go on with such a division between the super rich and selfish, often, not always, and the desperately needy for the basics of a decent life. He for whom the whole world waits has said that whatsoever shall be asked in his name, and with faith in the response, will see it accomplished. It's a great promise, and we have to ask correctly. And so we do. We know something of those organizations and projects which we would like to see supported, because essentially, whether they use that language or not, they work in the name of the Christ. So, we review the thought as we ask for the financial sustainment of those organizations, organisms, projects which are really helping. I ask the needed money for, and you can take a few moments to fill in what you are asking for whom, for what. can demand it, because from the center, which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. That is perhaps the most practical and concretizing aspect of the third great invocation. We want to see this happen. Love and light working out in humanity, and not this present insufferable, fractious relationship between haves and have-nots. Into that great crevice, the forces of evil can pour and divide humanity so that its redemption is badly delayed or even no longer possible in a timely manner. We have to understand that the Christ is real. Just getting that, the Christ is real. He is here in his Maya Virupa. He is a great guiding reality. Sometimes we may use the word Christ, Maitreya, and just indicating words without a deep realization that the great Lord is here. And accordingly, our attitude must be as here given. We have gathered in your name, Lord Maitreya. Be with us. Be within us. How life would change if more of the billions of the souls banished from true realization could gather in the name of the true Great One, and not in their distorted imagination of who he is and what he wants. He wants the welfare of humanity and the many kingdoms. He doesn't want to have the worshiper who says, I believe in you, now save me, send me to heaven. That is utterly useless. He doesn't want that. the mind, as it is in Christ, has to settle into our consciousness if we are to handle the financial resources of the world in the right way. We are in the presence of the great Lord. Wherever two or more are gathered in my name, there am I, he has told us. He is the very spirit of right relationship, right human relationship, right inter-kingdom relationship. The goodness, the beauty, the truth of right relationship is what he promotes. So, we attempt to feel true love sweeping through us, upholding the earth, as it were. The earth, as we know it, can be threatened and is now, and we must awaken to the implications. And take action. We have many ways of doing so, as shown here, a few of them. So many worthy organizations, organisms, methods of channeling help to a needy humanity through the right direction and distribution of the flowing golden substance of money. And in the fulfillment of our duty, we gather at the feet of the great Lord, here shown symbolically. What I'll do then is play the first great invocation, invoking the forces of light